A bitter wind screamed through Boston's streets as Engine 7 roared toward a towering column of black smoke rising over the harbor. Firefighter Tom Delgado gripped the door handle so tightly his knuckles whitened, jaw clenched against memories he couldn't outrun. 3 months ago his wife had left, leaving their home echoing and hollow, the scent of her perfume lingering in rooms he could no longer bear to enter. Since then, Tom had thrown himself into endless shifts, desperate to stay busy, trying to lose himself in the chaos of fire calls and alarms. But this morning felt different somehow, heavier, as though the city itself was waiting for him to face something he wasn't ready for. The radio squawked with updates about workers trapped on the upper floors of an old brick warehouse already engulfed in flames. Tom blinked back the sting of exhaustion as the truck skidded to a stop, sirens wailing. His boots hit the pavement hard, each step echoing the emptiness he carried inside. He barely noticed the bitter December chill biting his skin through his gear. And just as he raised his eyes to the fire, he caught a glimpse of a small, black and white figure that made his breath hitch. You won't believe how this story ends. It'll move even the coldest hearts and prove that sometimes the ones we save end up saving us right back. Sparks rained down like fiery snowflakes as flames clawed higher into the dawn sky, casting an eerie orange glow on the harbor's icy water. Tom raced to help haul hoses off the rig, but his eyes kept darting upward, searching for the flicker of movement he'd seen. Shouts from his crew split the air, men barking orders as they prepped the ladder truck. Smoke poured from shattered windows, carrying the acrid stench of burning chemicals and scorched wood. Tom coughed and wiped soot from his cheek, trying to shake the image out of his mind. But there it was again, a tiny tuxedo cat, black and white, perched precariously on the lower rungs of the fire truck's fully extended ladder. Its white whiskers trembled, and its bright green eyes seemed huge in its small face. The cat's fur was matted with soot, its paws leaving tiny dark smudges on the silver metal. And impossibly, the little creature began to climb higher, inching toward the smoke billowing out of the warehouse. Tom stared, unable to believe what he was seeing, heart suddenly hammering in his chest. Tom took one hesitant step forward, torn between his duty and the overwhelming urge to help this animal that seemed so wildly out of place. He'd seen animals caught in fires before, but never one that deliberately climbed into danger. The cat paused, glanced back over its shoulder, and let out a plaintive meow that sliced straight through Tom's guarded heart. The wind gusted, rattling the ladder, but the tuxedo cat only clung tighter and kept moving upward, white paws gripping each rung with trembling determination. Around Tom, firefighters shouted his name, ordering him to stay focused, to help pull civilians out from the smoky inferno, yet he couldn't drag his eyes away. It felt as if the cat was beckoning him, pulling him towards something he couldn't yet comprehend. A single tear stung his eye, surprising him with how quickly the tiny creature stirred feelings he'd locked away. The cat's small body disappeared briefly into the smoke, then reappeared higher on the ladder, meowing again. And Tom suddenly realized this wasn't just a stray cat. It felt like a sign he couldn't ignore. Engines rumbled, pumping water toward the flames as Tom struggled to keep his mind on the fire. But the cat's black and white form was like a living spotlight, impossible to look away from. He imagined how the metal rungs must be freezing against the cat's delicate paws, how the wind whipped fur and smoke into its eyes. The fire surged louder, belching sparks and heat that forced firefighters to shield their faces. Tom clenched his fists, torn between following orders and an instinct deeper than any training. Radios crackled warnings of potential collapse inside the warehouse, and the captain barked at everyone to stay sharp. Tom blinked rapidly, trying to push the tuxedo cat from his mind. But his pulse raced with the certainty that this animal was heading toward something, someone, in desperate need of help. Another meow pierced the chaos, urgent and almost guiding. And Tom felt the first hint of resolve breaking through the fog of his grief. Then, through the crackle of flames and wail of sirens, came a faint human voice crying out from the upper floors of the warehouse. Tom froze, the sound slicing through him like a blade. Because it wasn't just a scream. It was calling for help in a hoarse, desperate tone. He realized the tuxedo cat was climbing straight toward the window, where the voice echoed. The cat paused and looked back at him, as if urging him to follow, its eyes glinting with determination in the firelight. Tom's breath caught in his throat, a realization dawning that the cat wasn't fleeing the fire, but leading him toward it. Around him, his crew fought to keep the flames contained, oblivious to the small drama unfolding on the ladder. The crowd gathered behind police tape, cell phones raised to capture the spectacle, unaware of how much more was at stake. Tom stared upward, heart pounding, feeling every second stretch into an eternity. And deep inside, he knew that whatever choice he made next would change everything, for him and for whoever was still trapped inside. Tom's boots crunched over shards of glass as he moved closer to the ladder, his heartbeat rattling like a drum inside his ribcage. The tuxedo cat was now halfway up, clinging tightly as gusts of smoke and ash threatened to knock it off balance. Tom shouted for the other crew to stabilize the ladder, his voice sharp enough to slice through the roar of the fire. The captain shot him a bewildered look, demanding to know what the hell he thought he was doing. But Tom ignored him, eyes fixed on the tiny creature that seemed to defy the inferno's heat. Every instinct screamed to leave it, to focus on human lives trapped inside. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the cat was more than just an animal caught in chaos. It felt like a messenger, a link between him and whoever was crying out for help. He tightened his helmet strap, his gloved fingers trembling, and when the cat let out another desperate meow, Tom made a choice he knew could change everything. He lunged for the ladder's base and began to climb. The higher he climbed, the hotter the air became, searing through his turnout gear and pressing sweat from his skin. Below him, the crowd gasped as they saw a firefighter scaling the ladder, not toward the fire hose's spray, but toward a small black and white cat. Ash drifted like dark snowflakes, clinging to Tom's shoulders as he gritted his teeth and kept going. The cat looked back at him, its bright green eyes almost glowing in the smoky haze. It meowed again, and Tom could hear the strain in its voice as if pleading for him not to stop. Flames licked the building's edges, casting flickering orange light over the cat's white chest and paws. Tom's arms burned with fatigue, his mind screaming that this was reckless. Yet a deeper voice inside whispered that this was exactly what he was meant to do. He reached out one hand, fingers inches from the cat's trembling body. And at that moment, he heard the voice from inside the warehouse again, louder, clearer, and unmistakably human. "Please, somebody help me." The words tore through the smoke, a raw, choked sound that froze Tom's blood. He jerked his head toward the shattered window near the top of the ladder, realizing the tuxedo cat was perched almost directly beside it. The cat shifted its paws and seemed to point its tiny face toward the broken frame, as if urging Tom to look. Tom blinked rapidly, eyes stinging, heart hammering as he tried to process it all. The captain was now shouting at him through the radio, demanding he get back down and stick to protocol. But Tom couldn't unsee the cat's silent insistence, or the terrified eyes he glimpsed through the smoke-filled window. A shape moved behind the glass, coughing violently, clutching the window frame. Tom realized with a shock that it was a young woman, barely visible, her face streaked with soot and tears. And suddenly the mission was no longer just about the cat. It was about saving her too. Tom shouted down to the crew, telling them there was a victim directly above the ladder. The captain's eyes widened, the anger on his face melting into urgency as he relayed new orders. The crowd on the street exploded in a wave of nervous chatter as they realized a rescue was underway. Tom pulled himself up a few more rungs, trying to get closer to the cat. But the ladder swayed dangerously with every gust of wind. The tuxedo cat refused to budge, its tiny body pressed flat against the metal as though it were determined to stay put. Tom felt a surge of fear that he might accidentally knock it off if he made a wrong move. The building groaned ominously as flames devoured wooden beams inside, spitting embers into the open air. Sweat dripped into Tom's eyes, blurring his vision, but he forced himself to focus. The cat gave another sharp cry as though demanding he hurry. And with a deep breath, Tom stretched out his hand, bridging the last inches between them. Tom managed to scoop the tuxedo cat into his arm, feeling its trembling body pressed tight against his chest. The cat's fur was scorched in places, whiskers singed, but it was alive, clinging to his jacket as if it finally felt safe. He didn't even have time to think before swinging the cat around behind his neck, tucking it securely under his collar so he could free his hands. The animal stayed perfectly still, eyes wide, as though it understood the stakes. With the cat secure, Tom leaned closer to the window where the young woman was now banging her fists against the frame, coughing violently. Flames rolled up the side of the building just feet away from them, heat so intense it seemed to peel the skin from Tom's face. He yelled to the woman, telling her not to move, that he was coming for her. And in that split second, as the tuxedo cat's tiny claws dug gently into his shoulder, Tom realized he couldn't walk away anymore. He was all in, no matter what it cost him. Tom braced himself against the ladder, feeling the metal vibrate as chunks of flaming debris fell past him, shattering on the street below. The tuxedo cat clung to his shoulder, its small body vibrating with each cough it let out, fur singed but eyes blazing with determination. Tom reached the window ledge and smashed away remaining shards of glass with his gloved fist, ignoring the blood that started seeping through a tear in his jacket. Inside, the young woman staggered backward, coughing, her face ashen beneath streaks of soot. Heat radiated off the brick walls like an oven turned to broil, and smoke poured in waves around them, thick enough to choke every breath. Tom yelled over the roar of the flames, telling her to crawl toward him, to stay low, to trust him. The cat shifted its weight and meowed sharply in Tom's ear, as if urging him not to waste another second. The woman stared at the cat in stunned disbelief, tears welling in her smoke-reddened eyes. And Tom felt an electric jolt of hope course through him. He wasn't just fighting fire anymore. He was fighting for life itself. Outside, the crowd on the street was now screaming encouragement, phones aimed skyward, recording every second. Firefighters on the ground repositioned hoses, blasting arcs of water up the brick walls, trying to contain the fire's furious advance. Tom heard the captain shouting into the radio, telling the incident commander that they had an active rescue in progress. The young woman stumbled forward, and Tom grabbed her wrist, pulling her closer to the ladder. Flames exploded behind her, and for a terrifying instant, Tom thought the entire floor might collapse. The cat pressed itself against his neck, tail twitching as if it sensed the urgency in every movement. A burst of heat hit them so hard it felt like being slammed by a furnace door. Tom tightened his grip, adrenaline screaming through his veins, blocking out pain and fear. With a grunt, he pulled the woman halfway over the windowsill. And suddenly, the tuxedo cat let out a piercing yowl that seemed to galvanize them both into action. Tom maneuvered the woman onto the ladder, guiding her trembling feet to the rungs, while keeping one arm wrapped protectively around her waist. The cat shifted its weight to balance him, its claws lightly hooked into his jacket, surprisingly calm despite the chaos. The woman sobbed in relief, clutching Tom's arm with fingers sticky from soot and sweat. Each step downward felt impossibly long as the ladder swayed beneath their combined weight. Sparks drifted around them like fireflies, hissing as they fell onto wet pavement below. Firefighters on the ground held their arms out, ready to catch them if they fell. The woman's knees buckled once, and Tom nearly lost his balance, but the cat's claws dug in just enough to anchor him. The crowd erupted in cheers as Tom and the woman slowly descended, inch by inch, and for the first time in months, Tom felt alive, truly, fiercely alive, as though this single act of courage had jolted his soul awake. When they reached the ground, medics rushed forward, pulling the woman away to check her vitals, wrap her in blankets, and fit an oxygen mask over her face. She kept looking over her shoulder at Tom and the tuxedo cat, eyes brimming with gratitude and disbelief. The captain stormed over, ready to yell, but paused when he saw the cat perched calmly on Tom's shoulder, blinking at him like it had always belonged there. The crowd pressed closer, some people crying openly, others shouting Tom's name as if he were a hero from a movie. One young firefighter whispered that the cat had led Tom straight to the trapped woman, and soon the rumor began spreading like wildfire. A news crew shoved a camera toward Tom, demanding an interview, but he waved them off, too overwhelmed to speak. The tuxedo cat purred softly, pressing its nose into Tom's cheek, and Tom realized this wasn't just about saving a stranger. It was about finding himself again, piece by piece, through this tiny, fearless creature. Paramedics carried the woman to an ambulance, but before the doors closed, she grabbed Tom's hand and whispered something that made his throat tighten. "If it wasn't for that cat, I'd be dead." Tom nodded, unable to speak, as the cat meowed again, as if in gentle agreement. Around them, the fire crew began mopping up, and water streamed down the brick walls in smoky rivulets. The captain finally approached and slapped Tom on the shoulder, muttering that while he'd probably get written up for ignoring protocol, he'd also saved a life. And maybe two. Tom just stared at the tuxedo cat, amazed at how this small, soot-covered creature had cracked open a door in his heart he thought was sealed forever. A firefighter handed Tom a bottle of water, and Tom leaned down to offer a few drops to the cat, who lapped it up gratefully. Cameras flashed as the crowd kept chanting Tom's name, and someone yelled that the cat should be given a medal. And under the blinking lights of Engine 7, Tom realized he'd witnessed something miraculous, a moment of pure connection, born from fire and fear. A week later, the firehouse was quieter than usual, as Tom stood at his locker, staring at the turnout gear he'd worn that day. Outside, early sunlight spilled over the station's red doors, glinting off the chrome bumpers of Engine 7. The tuxedo cat, who the crew had taken to calling Blaze, wound around Tom's legs, purring so loudly it echoed off the tile floor. Tom knelt down, scratching Blaze under the chin, feeling the soft vibration of life, where so recently there had only been fear. The station dog, a Labrador named Daisy, had cautiously accepted Blaze's presence, though she still watched him with suspicious eyes. Every firefighter who passed by tossed Blaze a treat or stopped to pet him, as though he'd always belonged there. Tom couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so at home anywhere, not even in his own apartment. He found himself laughing more, sleeping better, no longer haunted by empty echoes of his past. And every morning Blaze perched on his shoulder as Tom checked his gear, as if to remind him he wasn't alone anymore. At home, Tom's life slowly transformed in small but profound ways. His apartment, once silent and sterile, now felt warm with the patter of paws and the soft jingle of Blaze's collar bell. Sunlight spilled through the windows onto fur-dusted furniture, and Tom found comfort in the simple routines of feeding, brushing, and talking to Blaze about his day. Nights were no longer endless voids. Instead, Blaze curled up beside him on the couch, resting his chin on Tom's chest while they watched old movies. The tuxedo cat seemed to sense when Tom's thoughts darkened, nudging his cheek gently or draping a paw over his hand. Friends and colleagues began visiting more often, drawn in part to Blaze's unexpected fame. Tom felt himself opening up again, not just to people but to life itself. It was as though Blaze had taken the ashes of Tom's grief and built something new, a fragile but hopeful future. And even the quiet moments, like washing Blaze's tiny food bowls, filled Tom with a surprising sense of peace. Word of the rescue spread far beyond Boston, carried by news outlets and viral videos showing Tom descending the ladder with Blaze perched on his shoulder. Donations poured in for the fire department's animal rescue fund, and animal shelters across the city reported a spike in tuxedo cat adoptions. Tom was invited to speak at community events, where people wanted to hear how a small cat had led him to save a human life, and in a way, saved his own. Blaze became a local celebrity, featured on morning shows, and even offered a Firehouse Cat honorary title by the city. Children sent drawings of Blaze in tiny firefighter hats, and senior citizens wrote letters thanking Tom for giving them hope in dark times. The department received new funding for pet oxygen masks and animal rescue training, inspired by Blaze's story. And for the first time in years, Tom felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. The cat who'd climbed into the fire had ignited a spark that now burned brightly throughout the entire community. Small gestures revealed the true depth of the bond between Tom and Blaze. At the firehouse, Blaze would sit by the alarm bell, as if ready to join every call. During drills, he perched on Tom's shoulder, tail flicking in rhythm with the crew's movements. When Tom visited the young woman rescued from the warehouse, Blaze was there too, hopping gently into her lap as she broke into tears of gratitude. The cat seemed to radiate calm and comfort wherever he went, as though carrying a piece of that harrowing day's miracle inside his tiny frame. Tom often caught himself speaking to Blaze as if to a partner, sharing worries and hopes he couldn't voice to anyone else. Other firefighters started confessing that Blaze made them feel calmer after rough calls. Even the captain, gruff and skeptical at first, began carrying treats in his pocket, just in case the hero cat drops by. And in those quiet, ordinary moments, Tom realized healing often arrived in the smallest, most unexpected packages. Months later, standing beside Engine 7 as a spring breeze rustled the city flags overhead, Tom cradled Blaze in his arms, gazing out at Boston Harbor. The city skyline shimmered under the rising sun, a symbol of both resilience and new beginnings. Tom thought about how close he'd come to shutting himself off forever, drowning in grief and loneliness. But then, a tuxedo cat had climbed a ladder into the heart of a burning building and into his life. He remembered the terrified mews, the determined green eyes, the way Blaze had refused to give up until someone was saved. Now, every sunrise felt like a gift, every shift a chance to make a difference. Blaze nestled closer, purring with contentment, his whiskers brushing Tom's chin. Tom smiled, eyes shining as he whispered words only Blaze could hear. And in that quiet moment, Tom knew the truth with absolute certainty. He didn't just save a cat, he found himself.